We've been pushing it off for a while, but now it's probably time. Yeah, lots of other people are having this conversation. Should the Hornets really consider trading LaMelo Ball? We'll get to it next. Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your pods, and that includes YouTube. Did want to tell you before we get started on this conversation, I'm sure Doug has no problem with me procrastinating this until we get later and later into the day. Did want to tell you this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to, but faster. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. There's Doug Branson, a frowny Doug Branson. You can find his work on his substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me, WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Wes and Walker, 92.7 FM. Yeah, we could have had this conversation a while if we discuss what other people are talking about on their national podcast, what people are throwing out there, what I get on the world famous WFNZ text line frequently. If we start to, if we discuss what everyone else is talking about, Doug, then this conversation is a little too late. But you and I never really, I don't want to say it wasn't ever realistic, but we kept pushing it off because we had games to get to. We had things that were, I guess, a little more interesting to us, a niche daily Hornets pod. Even so, we found a way to push this off. But now with Bill Simmons having the annual worst NBA contract draft, a couple of his ringer buddies join him and they go 1 through 3. Don't even know if it's a snake draft, whatever. But they start drafting the worst NBA draft or worst NBA contracts in the game right now. For instance, Ben Simmons was number 1, understandable. Bradley Beal, number 2, maybe a little more debatable. Still, the no trade clause is terrible, whatever, right? Those are the first 2 picks. Well, as you go later into the pod, a little past the 1 hour mark, LaMelo Ball's name comes up, and it's Bill Simmons drafting LaMelo Ball as one of the worst contracts in the NBA. You have some of the quotes from Bill and his reasoning as to why he drafts him, right? What are the quotes there, Doug?
I don't really have the quotes. I can tell you why he did it. And I will say, Bill Simmons has been on a journey with LaMelo Ball, right? I mean, he was very critical of him pre-draft. Didn't even think he should be drafted in the top 5. Then essentially apologized for that later on. I don't know why he did that. He should have consulted me. You never apologize. There's just no benefit to it.
Didn't consult you on that one.
No. But anyway, he did, and he came around on LaMelo Ball, and now he's all the way back around. Although, to his credit, I think if you watch this podcast, he's not like jumping for joy because all of this is around his injuries, right? It's ankle injuries. It's really, I think some of the other people on the podcast tried to make it about his unseriousness, the laughing incident on the bench when the Hornets were getting shellacked. You sort of put that side by side with Brandon Miller, who is always super serious and a little bit dour and, walks away sad when they lose. And then I think one of the guys on the podcast mentioned Wemby and how serious Wemby is about, getting San Antonio where he wants to get them to. Although I would say, San Antonio does a lot of losing. So, but he's right though. Wemby is like, he wants to be an NBA superstar and he wants it right now. So all that to say, it really was all about the ankle injuries and then the fact that the contract is 5 years and it starts next season, and there's just questions about both LaMelo's ceiling, but more importantly, his just general availability to play basketball games under that new deal.
Yeah. So, all right. I don't know where we start. Maybe we start do we consider LaMelo Ball's contract bad? Which I do not. I do not consider it a worse contract. I don't think it should have been selected. I think there are plenty of other contracts to select. We can talk about LaMelo as the player who, yes, is injured, and that complicates things a lot. The guy has not played at all, really, the last couple of years. And what's really concerning is that when he does come back onto the court, there's another injury that he suffers, and then he goes back to the sideline. That is a real bad sign, no doubt about it. But the player is worthy of that contract, in my opinion. So then we get to the fact, can you trade LaMelo Ball on that contract? Which I think is an emphatic yes. And I think for that reason alone, even if you don't think LaMelo was worth the rookie max extension that he got, Hornets gave it to him, no brainer, didn't even think twice about it. I thought it was a good piece of business. If you care about the people part, saying we take care of the young talent that we draft, and just keeping the talent from a basketball standpoint, it made sense because the injury history hadn't mounted up to what it is now. And so you still give him that contract. Even so, the contract would warrant what, Doug? Like multiple first-round picks in return? I think maybe I'm inflating that value a little too much, but I can tell you this, as a Hornets fan, I would not trade LaMelo Ball for anything less. I wouldn't consider it for anything less than 2 first-rounders, and if you think that's inflating it, then we're just not going to get a deal done. So then once we start to go to, is it a bad contract? I think no on the player, no on the trade value as far as what it would bring in a trade package. So then we get to, is he tradable? Would you trade him? Would you do that?
That's a lot of questions. Which would you like me to tackle first?
Well, no, I'm saying I'm telling you I would not. That's where I am. I don't think it's a bad contract. I wouldn't trade him. Now you can attack whatever you want to.
Do I think it's a bad contract? No, it's concerning. I'm not going to say it's bad because you have to take a lot of things into context. You have to take the fact that he got an all-star bid. And you have to take the fact that Steve Clifford talks about it all the time. This team right now literally has no one that you can run an offense through and throw him the ball and go make a play. Like that's LaMelo Ball. That's the impact that when he's got his deep shot going, when he's moving defenses the way we know he can, when he's dribble driving the way we know he can, that's the impact that he has offensively for this team. Is he, super complete all NBA level player? No. Does he have the potential to be? Yes. And when you're a small to mid-sized market team, you have to bet on potential. You're not going to be able to go out in free agency and go get guys that are proven commodities with much ease, unless that, special situation pops up and then you have to go attack that. But, you do have to bet on potential. And so that's what the Hornets did. What's concerning is that the same injury keeps happening to the right ankle. And I think what's concerning on top of that is that it doesn't seem like everything is being done to protect that ankle from the player's perspective because of some comfort issues with, wearing braces or what have you. And if that's the case, if all precautions aren't being taken to protect him and his ability to be out on the court and play, and you weigh that against the size of that contract, it's tremendous. But at the same time, it's not as if they've committed to 2 other max contracts, and this max contract is really just going to weigh them down. They're actually in a really good position in that they have a lot coming off the books, or they have a lot of young players that are still on decent-sized deals, especially with this trade deadline and bringing in Mann and Micic and some of these guys that are on rookie deals. Like, if any team was going to take on a max contract that wasn't going to work out, the Hornets are actually probably in the best position to do that. Yeah. So all that to say, I agree with you. I don't think it's anywhere near the worst contract, but it's certainly concerning. And we can talk more about my thoughts on trading LaMelo, which I think are similar to yours, but slightly different.
Yeah, and I lumped those in together, so we can talk about that more in the second segment because we can break down each of these things. But no, I don't think it's a bad contract right now. You're to say that you're not concerned means you would be intentionally looking away and going, la, 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 he's not hurt. I don't see it whatsoever. You got to be a little concerned because for every reason I just stated, the fact that he continues to get hurt when he does go out there, but also you're right. You would probably like to see something a little more visible to us, the public eye, on he's doing everything he possibly can to take care of himself. And we don't see know that for sure.
That's it. We see him warming up a lot. We don't see a boots. That is, unless someone comes out and says like, hey, yes, you see that, but here's what you don't see, and here's why he's not playing. I think fans are reasonable to say, why isn't this dude playing right now? Like, why isn't he playing right now? What's going on?
Yeah, and so we can go back to as well, like the whole saga of, is he going to play? Is he not? It doesn't look like he's going to, with Steve Clifford's comments in a press conference, I think before a Milwaukee game. Then we talked to him out there for a charity event on Wes and Walker, and then he's like, yeah, he's close. And it was very different. It was a very different soundbite, and he's still not out there. Maybe that was just Steve saying, I got a little too carried away with the previous comments here on this show. I'm just going to set maybe I'm intentionally leading them astray. I'm just going to say something super generic, and then they could take whatever they want to. But this is always like, this is, PR 101. As you can be as vague as you want to, that's fine. But as long as you're that vague, then we're going to try to extrapolate. We're going to try to speculate all the eights. We're going to try to figure out what the hell's going on, because we just can't seem to get any information to the contrary as to what we might be speaking about.
Yeah, and every opportunity that he doesn't play is an opportunity wasted for him to, get to know some of these new players, get better as a player, because his game does have holes. There's just no doubt about it. When they talk about his defense on this podcast, in terms of max player, all NBA sort of aspirations, they're right. Like, his defense is never going to be elite, but, it's got to be better than it's been. And he doesn't have any opportunity to work on that with Clifford, with the team, when he's not playing. And the questions do exist, and they're fair questions of, does he want to play? Is he scared about the ankle, about testing it? Will he be concerned about doing some of the things that make LaMelo when he gets back out there? Is he serious about bringing, winning basketball to Charlotte if he's not going to play? All of those questions become fair game when you don't play, when it looks like you're kind of going to play, when other people say you're close to playing, and then we don't see you.
And I think he loves the game. I think he cares. I think that's the only thing we've seen written about him through the first few years in Charlotte. I'm not trying to say to other people, like, it's pretty well documented that he actually doesn't love watching the game, but he loves being in the gym, which it's funny. That's something that is a very big distinction with LaMelo. He's told you, I don't really watch basketball like that.
Which could go to the unseriousness, right? Like, he's sitting on the bench and he's not totally, he's like me. I relate to that. I don't love listening to podcasts that I'm not speaking on. So I do relate to that.
But we also know, at least Steve Clifford has told us, that LaMelo really enjoys learning, and he and Steve have a really good relationship, a basketball relationship where LaMelo wants to get better. And I truly believe that. So it's just frustrating that we don't know what's going to happen. And the last thing I'll say, too, is Steve says there's a difference in the offseason when you have a rehab offseason, and then you also have one that you can get better, because LaMelo had a rehab offseason all last year. We found out very late in the process that he was only cleared for training camp, like a week before? And so we missed all of that info, right? There's not media going out every day because there's just not media availability to know what the timeline is on LaMelo's injury. And then once they get to training camp, Steve Clifford tells you, yeah, he was just cleared. Like, you got to remember, he's still getting his legs back under him, still getting his breath, and he was only cleared a week before. So all offseason last year, an injury rehab offseason. Can we get to this offseason, if you're not going to play a game, which it doesn't look like it anymore, if you're going to get to this one, we hope that this can be hey, we're going to get better in a lot of different areas, and he's going to come back rip-roaring, ready to go, whatever that may mean. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe that's the calculation.
Yeah, maybe. All right, let's now have the trade LaMelo Ball conversation coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
More LaMelo talk. Is a LaMelo trade realistic? We can have that discussion on whether it's the right decision, but is it realistic? Are the Hornets truly considering it? We'll get to it in just a moment on Locked On Hornets. Before we do that, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Stitch Fix. You know that instant confidence boost you get from an outfit that makes you look really good? That's what you get with Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget, and they do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. You can easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist that helps find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. You just give your stylist your size, style, and budget preferences. You order boxes when you want, how you want, and plus no subscription required. They send 5 just for you pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. You keep what works, and then you can send back the rest. Your stylist always sends just right pieces, and the fit is on point. It's like they have style ESP or something. You don't know how they do it, but they just get you. It just works. Stitch Fix makes it all so easy. You don't like the shop, and they save you the time and effort. Plus, you get outfits that make you look and feel really good. If you don't love something, just send it back. No big deal. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you look and feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. stitchfix.com/lockedon. More Locked On Hornets ahead. I tried to lump these two segments together here into one, but now we can break it into two, right? Bad contract. We don't think it's a bad contract. We're concerned with LaMelo. But now comes the trade LaMelo piece. And this is the thing I see featured more so on that WFNZ text line I was discussing. Every once in a while, people will be in my mentions with a fake trade for LaMelo, or just somebody said it on a national pod, whatever. And this is starting to pick up some steam here, Doug. This is the real convo lots of people have been having for quite some time. And I am one to tell you I do not agree with it. I don't think the Hornets should trade LaMelo. In my opinion, you've done the hard thing twice now. You found LaMelo Ball, a guy that is an all-star by his second season in the league at 20 years old. Even coming into this year, he's going to turn, 23 this upcoming NBA season, and he already has an all-star selection under his belt. He was well on his way to get another one before he turned 23, and I'm just not willing to give up on talent like that, even with the injuries under the microscope right now. I'm not giving up on that because that's really hard to do. It's really hard to draft an NBA all-star, two-time all-star, if everything would have played out correctly before 23. Then they did it again when they got Brandon Miller, who looks like he has an all-NBA type ceiling, at least right now. So if you get both of those guys, and they can fit really well together, I think both of them are real malleable basketball players. I think LaMelo with his catch and shoot numbers, I think with him being a taller point guard, with him being a good passer, I think he can play off ball as the two. I think he can play on ball as the one, which we've seen for his entire career. And then Brandon Miller is a great secondary ball handler. So we did the hard thing twice, Doug. We got two guys that also fit really well. You could even mishmash your best player available versus position of need and find it all in one with Brandon Miller when you selected him. And so the fact that you have those two guys, I'm not willing to give up on that yet. If it happens again next year, cool. Maybe I give that trade a little more life to it. But right now, I'm just not giving up on that.
I think your willingness or unwillingness to give up on talent is a little bit beside the point, because I don't think that there are going to be suitors out there that are going to be willing to take the risk on LaMelo Ball and the size and length of that contract. Really, I mean, just take the money away and just say the number of years on that contract when you don't know if this guy is going to be healthy enough to make, forget a significant impact on your team, any impact at all on your team. And you know, I don't think it's a huge factor, but the idea that is, and it has nothing to do because they're different people, but Lonzo Ball and the situation that he's going through, that's got to hit some kind of, you know, it's got to pop off some kind of neuron when a GM, an opposing GM, is thinking about bringing LaMelo Ball onto the team. And so I just don't even think that a package would materialize such that anyone would be satisfied with the return that you would get on LaMelo Ball at this point. And so what I would say to anyone who is interested in trading LaMelo Ball is that it's kind of the same thing that I say to producer Katie when she's concerned about messing up our baby. You know, and this is a very common concern that parents have. Oh, am I going to say something? Am I going to do something that's like going to have ripple effects that you know, mess them up in the future, that they're going to think about, that they're going to talk to their therapist about? And I always have the same response. We have plenty of time to mess this child up. So let's not worry about it right now. And also, there are so many other people that are going to have an opportunity to mess this child up that we overinflate our ability to do that, you know. So that would be my thing to people who want to trade LaMelo. There is plenty of time to have that conversation. Now is not that time because the Hornets aren't even good yet. If the Hornets had made a playoffs without LaMelo, right? If Brandon Miller right now were leading this team to a 6th seed, I bet that would have been incredible. If Miles Bridges was playing better than if Miles Bridges were a 1 all of a sudden, then okay, I would be willing to say, well, hey, could you get 2 picks? You know, maybe you do move on because you've got a core. You don't even have a core. You don't even have anything that's proven that it can even get to the playoffs, much less win there. And so you got to see where this road leads with LaMelo and then try to find a time to bail if you need to bail later on.
Well, and so I think people would argue that because they're not even good yet, this is the time to capitalize on it. So if now, like, all the conversations of needing to give LaMelo help as soon as possible, those seem to have shifted because you usually have those conversations around the head of the snake. And now many people would argue that that's going to be Brandon Miller moving forward. So then we shift that convo from LaMelo to Brandon. Hey, we got to give him as much help as possible. Let's get a couple of first-round picks from LaMelo and apply it. Now we can have do you think he gets a couple of first-round picks? And if he doesn't, then you're right. It probably wouldn't make much sense. And see, maybe I'm just miscalculating it. You're right. Like, maybe I'm miscalculating the value here. I didn't expect him to show up in a worst NBA contracts draft. I did not expect a team to not be interested in trading for LaMelo, especially with like a semi-contender looking to take a real risk. It's a risk, but I just don't view it as this, whoo, buddy. Like, Zion comes to mind, where I know Zion's ceiling is higher. He's playing very well right now, but whoo, buddy. I mean, that contract was really scary. We had the conversation a lot of times with the number 2 overall pick. Would you trade number 2 and whatever, salary matching, all that stuff, to go after Zion, who was overweight and also injury ridden as well? But that's what that was even still going to get some real value in return. So like, I think teams would be interested enough to where you could get off of LaMelo if you really wanted to at like pretty fair value, or at least close to it. But yeah, to your point, you're probably right. If you're not, then I'm just not trading him anyway.
So to me, you hit on the, I think, salient point here, which is that the engine of the Zion trade talks was not entirely the injuries. It was the being overweight. It was the whispers and rumors that would come from unnamed sources within the franchise that were questioning Zion's willingness to reach all of the potential that he could reach. To date, we have not heard any of that come out of this organization. Now, to me, this conversation changes fundamentally if we do start to hear something, pop off in the Observer from someone within the franchise that says, well, I don't know if he was entirely as willing to get back on the court as maybe you would expect a guy on a max contract to be. Then all of a sudden, red lights start, red alert, all of that starts to happen because you go, okay, what's really going on here? But none of that's happened. And so that's why I'm on team, hey, let's wait. Let's get him fully healthy. Let's hope and pray that he is going to take every necessary step to, whether that be, strengthening the ankle in terms of, his regimen over the offseason, or equipment or whatever, that he takes every precaution necessary to stay healthy, and that it happens. And continue to and continue to light candles around pictures of Steph Curry and just that whole idea of this guy who looked like he had glass ankles and then did things to protect those ankles and then became, this elite player, and still hold on to hope that that's what LaMelo's story turns out to be.
I wonder what the masses think about this with Hornets fans. I think early on, especially we have the different faction of LaMelo stans, which is a group entirely within itself. It is very different. It is a rugged, aggressive beast, especially that exists within the YouTube sphere. And so the LaMelo stans are one faction, right? But then you have the Hornets fans also, who I think early on also agreed that we shouldn't trade him. And the masses agreed with it. I still think that's true, but I do think it's shifted, Doug, a little bit. Like, there are a lot more people that, one, continue to be concerned at the very least, which I totally understand. That's a reasonable take. It's reasonable to think that LaMelo his future might be affected because of all the injuries that he suffered. But I also think that they're ready, like, hey, I don't want to deal with this. I want to move on. Even with the lack of talent that's been in this organization for so long, like they're willing to give up on it here. I would push back on that, but I do think we're starting to see more and more people infiltrate that space of, hey, I just don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be a part of it. I'm scared. I want to trade LaMelo before this thing gets really dark and we have to get pennies on the dollar and it's just like a salary dump at that point. So like, I do think people are more and more moving into that space. And we have one more year left, Doug, before we might realize that darkness. Like we have 1 year and one more injury left of realizing that darkness as reality.
But the thing is, it's shifted, right? Because he hasn't played.
Yeah.
Right? Because if he's played, then people see the three-pointers, they see the amazing passes, they see what he's done in little stretches post his first All-Star bid. But if you see that over the longer term, then you go, no, I cannot deny what my eyes see. But you can so easily deny, what you can't see. And the Hornets fans cannot see. They see LaMelo in street clothes. And I don't know, how much credence to give to the unseriousness piece of it. I just think we blow all that stuff out of proportion, and we look at
I hate it.
Brandon Miller frowning on the sideline, and we think that means something, and we think that LaMelo smiling on the sideline means something. No,
totally ridiculous. You're right.
So, I just think he's got to play, and that's why I'm so really adamant about it earlier and that's why I was so adamant about it earlier in the show. Like if he's not going to play, we need to hear why he's not playing. Okay, we need a firmer understanding of that. Otherwise, I think it's fair for people to question what's going on there. But here's the thing. Because he's not playing, and this is the problem, I feel like we're a little bit boxed in here. Because he's not playing, I just don't see another franchise going, oh, yeah, sure, 3? Why not 4 first-round picks for this guy that we don't even know? We don't know what the status of his ankles are. There's no scenario in my mind where there's a trade package that would develop that would satisfy the Hornets and the value that they've already invested in LaMelo and that a team would be willing to give up. Those two things have to match, and until he plays 60 games in a season, that's 40, I don't know, 50? Like, until he does that, that's just not going to happen.
You might be right. You're probably right. I think this is the teams get desperate enough mindset for me to where I think they would be willing to take it. Like you could talk yourself into, he's going to make our players better when on the floor. He has a big contract coming up, but he's still very young. And I'm not saying that that's true. I'm saying teams talk themselves into decisions every single offseason, multiple times via trades, via free agents. I could easily see a team doing that, but maybe you're right. Maybe there's enough going on, enough scuttlebutt to where that might just not happen for LaMelo to the point where it's just not realistic. So,
well, listen, I mean, if you could, chloroform Daryl Morey and get Elton Brand on the phone and see if you can, see if you can make it happen. Look, that's what I'm saying. If a crazy scenario like that pops up, listen, the Hornets of old used to do this all the time. They would find a little nugget, and then the nugget would want a ton of money, and the Hornets did it then because they were cheap. Not because, with Larry, with Larry Johnson, it was injuries concerned too. They were concerned about giving a guy that had some back stuff. They were concerned about giving him, backing up the truck and giving him a truckload of cash. And but the Hornets of old have done this before, where they flip players that were central to the franchise, they were the best players on the franchise, and they flipped them for packages of players, and not necessarily picks, but players that then vaulted them into continued playoff status. The issue is, what I hit on earlier, is that the Hornets aren't even anywhere near a team that could take on, a Glenn Rice and a package of players from the Miami Heat or the New York Knicks or whatever and make a run. They're not even anywhere near that. So I just don't know that makes any sense either.
All right, let's move on. We have one more segment to go coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
There are the actual games to talk about. The Hornets continue their road stretch. 3 more. Yes, they have 3 more road games before they're back at home for 8 straight games. It's crazy. We'll talk about the schedule here in the last segment. Before we do that, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get qualified candidates within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that a small business, they're wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Doug, you told me before we started recording that you and Fax have not had a great relationship the past couple of shows. Now, you've had to make a couple of corrections in previous shows, but this time it's not a correction. You just said you have a clarification. Not a correction, just a clarification to make.
Yeah, just a clarification. I am not in any way, I just want to protect us legally. I am not in any way advocating that Jeff Peterson, the new EVP of basketball operations, put chloroform onto a rag and then chloroform Daryl Morey and tie him up and put him in a closet a la Celtic Pride. No, I'm not advocating that at all. I'm just saying if they were to do that and Elton Brand were to offer 4 picks for LaMelo Ball, I just don't think you can say no in that scenario. And also in that scenario, you are going to need some really good legal representation.
Thank you for that. Locked On Podcast did not condone that message. We have our own free
I don't condone it.
Not endorsement. Yeah, no, I don't.
I'm just saying, if it happens, it happens.
It does. That's true. Thank you for that clarification. Not a correction, but just a clarification. Doug, what do you see in the Hornets matchup against the Orlando Magic tonight? We just got to see them take on Orlando at home. It got close a little bit late, but then eventually Orlando was able to separate themselves. What do you remember from that game that you might apply here to this matchup?
Yeah, and same lineup for the Magic. They have no injuries. Those sons of... when I see a team play the Hornets and none is in the injury block, I get so angry. I'm holding it in right now. I'm smiling on the outside, but I'm fuming on the inside.
Yep.
How could the basketball gods do this to us? What I remember about that game is that the Magic play some intense on-ball defense, and they forced the Hornets into like 3 straight turnovers to open that game. It was part of a series of games where the Hornets just really came out, the starters, and laid an egg in the first quarter and had to fight to get back into those games and didn't have enough juice to make a 10-point comeback in the third quarter or something like that. And they got off to a bad third quarter start in that game too. So, got to have more poise when they put that pressure on. And the Magic beat them over the head with their size. What's different in this game is Pokusevski. They did not have Poku in that. Well, they did, but they didn't play him. Now he's part of this little tight 8-man rotation that the Hornets have. And Poku does give them not more beef, but a little bit more length down low defensively to block shots, to affect shots, to move guard drives out of the lane. So hopefully that can make a little bit of an impact on the defensive end of the floor off the bench. But really, they've just got to protect the basketball. Miles Bridges, Grant Williams in particular. Also, love to see a bounce-back game from Brandon Miller, just in general, but off that ejection. Want to see that too. But you have to protect the basketball or you've got no shot.
Yeah, we know that last time the size really bothered the Hornets, which is the same thing for a lot of different teams. But remember, Orlando spent so many years in the first round deciding to select the 6'9" guy that can do it all. Then eventually it paid off once they got somebody offensively gifted like Paolo Banchero. So then they get Franz Wagner, who is a very good shooter and also on the perimeter. He's a hell of a player. So, okay, now we're actually starting to get real talent to realize what also can happen with putting that talent around just just a whole bunch of athletic bodies. And then they just started dunking it on their head at the Spectrum Center. Franz Wagner got in on it. Mo Wagner did too. All the Wagners showed up and slammed it. I thought Jonathan Isaac defensively was really good. Brandon Miller had the shakeup, that mid-range jumper on Isaac, which was a fun highlight, but Isaac's defense was very good. Grant Williams couldn't really do anything inside. I don't expect him, where he's actually shooting pretty well at the rim overall in his time with the Hornets. I don't expect this to be a strong game from Grant Williams in the paint. So hopefully the three ball is falling for him, and hopefully he's making plays for others. And so those are some of the thoughts. But Brandon Miller, also a bounce back game from him after the ejection. Like, how does he respond? Do we get angry Brandon Miller from the Hornets? And also, I remember against Orlando, we had the mid-range talk with him. Do we get a different kind of shot diet, or do we just expect him to still try to pull up in the mid-range because of that size that might bother the Hornets? Those are a couple of thoughts from me heading into this game.
I'm pretty sure I saw Richard Wagner, the German opera composer, in there at one point, rose from the dead. And,
on their head.
Rise of the Valkyries, right into the teeth of the Hornets defense. Yeah, too many Wagners. Got to stop those guys. Interesting schedule this week. The Hornets play tonight, and then they have 3 days off. And I looked at that. First of all, I was like, yeah, whew. I take a breath. We can talk about LaMelo. We can talk about, when you go through the grind of having to talk about these games, you don't have time to really kind of step back. So we'll have some time this week to step back, talk about some of the tournament stuff. We'll have David Walker on, who pays attention to college basketball. We'll get him on to talk about some players that he's watching as it relates to the Hornets draft. Looks like they're going to have a high draft pick. So that's all good. But I looked at the schedule at first and I was like, why do the Hornets have had a grueling schedule heading into this week? Why suddenly the let up? And then I went, oh yeah, Charlotte, Spectrum Center. I bet they're hosting the tournament. And sure enough, they are hosting part of the regionals. But it made me think of something that we often talk about on this show this time of year, which is that this is something that the organization, Hornet Sports and Entertainment, this is something that they've done for many years, which is they will host not only NCAA tournament events, they will host conference tournament events, and it messes with the Hornets' schedule. And you'll see them play a ton of, they'll have their big road trip around this time, and then you've got this massive homestand that's coming up, record-setting homestand, but that's all because of the schedule manipulation and dance that they have to do to host these big events, which is all fine and good if the Hornets are what the Hornets are right now, which is not good, which is not in playoff contention. But what always worries me is that when the Hornets do eventually, and it will happen, they will contend for the playoffs again. If they continue to do this kind of schedule manipulation for financial considerations, it's like a chicken and the egg kind of thing. Like, yeah, we have to do it because we're not making enough money on the Hornets, but you're not making enough money on the Hornets because the Hornets aren't winning, and the Hornets aren't winning in part, or they might miss the playoffs one year because you're doing this weird stuff with the schedule and making it difficult for the team when they need it to not be difficult.
Yeah, well, the thing is, right, so Spectrum Center, the city, it was like, hey, we'll worry about that when we get there. Right now, we're going to take these tournament
But we
games.
never get there.
And we're going to get this tournament money. That's what we're going to do. North Carolina, 1 seed? Yeah. They're going to play in Charlotte? Yeah. We're going to go ahead and host this first round. Yeah, North Carolina fans are going to show up in the masses. I think tip is at like 249 on Thursday, so lots of Heels fans going to be in town. Plus, if there is a little bit of a Virginia contingency, UVA, if they win their first 4 game in, then they'll get to the first round play in Charlotte. So you have some local matchups. But you're right. It does manipulate the schedule for the Hornets, and it's made it very weird to where now we have 4 road games, then we have 8 home games. It's pretty crazy.
And I seem to recall, and I will put a big maybe on this because I've gone out on some limbs and the limb cracked and I fell down to the ground. But I'll put a big maybe on this. But I seem to recall that when the Hornets were in playoff contention back in, and I'm not talking about play-in, but back when they were actually in the playoffs in 15-16, I do recall Clifford in some offseason making some kind of sort of vague reference to this idea of sometimes it can be difficult late in the season because scheduling is what scheduling is, and you've got to make some considerations for such. I'm just going to continue to fly this flag. I'm going to continue to fly the airplane over the beach with this, big thing, banner hanging out from behind it saying, hey, if the Hornets are on, look, if the Hornets are overwhelmingly good, it's not going to matter, right? San Antonio had their big rodeo road trip or whatever, and it never mattered because they had Tim Duncan and because they had blah, 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 blah. They had all these players. But so if the Hornets are so good, it's not going to matter. But if they are sort of on the edge, it can make a difference if you're playing, 8 games in 13 nights, and most of those are on the road because you've got to make some room in the schedule for this. That's all I'm saying.
The good news is the tournament, it's only here every 4 years or so. Last time they were here, it's a while ago, but maybe they'll come up with something different.
That Hornets, you've got a 3-year window here to figure this thing out.
All right, do with it what you will. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. Again, we're free and available anywhere you get your pods. Watch us on YouTube, subscribe. Cliche, smash that follow button. Make sure you're getting all the notifications when we do put up a video. And again, we're still putting out the Audible medium with no visuals whatsoever. If you like that better, catch us anywhere you get your podcast. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.